just to wrap up what she was saying in short, the UNFCCC has this conference of parties, or parties in other words can be countries, where all countries come together to come and negotiate a certain text, to come and negotiate a certain matter. I gave an example, Kantela, about the cyclone and floods that happen in Malawi. So let's say they're coming to negotiate Malawi. So I also gave an example of Botswana. Those floods, right? So imagine I'm coming to the room to come and negotiate concerning that money that has to go to the flood people. Well, what about me? But you also have to understand which parties you are. So she did also mention the different groups. There are developed countries, US, the EU, and the likes, the Western whatnot. And then there are developing countries, that's like the biggest of them all, because almost all countries that are not developed are in the developing countries. That includes even us. But the developing country is as vast as possible because it also includes countries like China, even though, yes, we know how China is. And Saudi Arabia, even though we know those guys got money, it's that vast. Then there are the least developed countries. Or something like that. Like Lesotho, Malawi, Uganda, Ethiopia, the likes, Bangladesh and all those ones, the least developed countries. Then there are the small islands. That one is a self-explanatory. The ones that are in the island countries, they also have their issues, and most of their issues are floods, cyclones. Yes, those matters. Yes. So those are the different groups that we have. So when you are coming in and you are in your different groups, you have to also maybe see how you can negotiate without even just thinking of Botswana only, but also looking at the fact that you are negotiating possibly sitting next to like South Africa. You see how South Africa is like up there compared to us, but it's also a developing country. So sometimes they vary in that instance. So in terms of the terms for the COP, we call them the G77 in China. The group 77, there were supposed to be 77 parties in there, and China. China had to be added because, as Pato has said, it's still developing. And then we have Africa Group of Negotiators. That includes all African countries in there. They are called Africa Group of Negotiators. So even now when we get to COP, the first things we do is to go and touch base with these groups. It starts first with the Africa Group of Negotiators doing a position paper. Do you remember a few sessions, the session before break time, you guys were doing a position paper? We do something like that as well as Africa, so that when we get there, like at Botswana, I should know what Africa is saying, so that when I say something, I could say, as Africans, we have said that, so that one speaking, I have some sort of backup from African countries. Yes, sorry about that. So I was saying, but just first, you should also understand that even though we're all in Africa, our problems are always different. I gave an example of Malawi. It's the least developed country, and their problems are also different. Because as much as it's a least developed country, when we are being hit by drought, Botswana they are funding their own budget. To say the farmer so that they can recuperate from what happened. But countries like Malawi don't even have a fund or budget to from. So when you're negotiating, you also think of those things. I hope it's clear. Is it clear? Yes. So in short, as I'm giving back to Pat, you are all potential enemies. So by all means, everything that is in front of you is different from the other person, and you won't know until motho atis. And one thing that is a great secret and importance is when you are in, for example, the Africa group of negotiators, what you discuss shall not by any means be leaked to any other group. We have had instances, but not with us, where people from other groups, they get from that group, sending a cute girl to this other group. Let's go out for drinks tonight, go couple in a different country. That's how serious it is. How they can easily, counteract it and they lose. That's how serious it is. Yes, and sometimes they fight. They, not us.
Awesome, thank you. So we're going to start. Our COP. We're going to go through this paper so that we're all on the same page. So with this exercise, we will be simulating COP negotiations, as we've been talking about, and we'll be focusing on the Loss and Damage Fund, representing different countries and interest groups. So you are sitting in your interest groups. Again, if you look at that half page, you'll see which interest group you are part of. I get a label, and you all know what your interests are. Do you all know what your interests are? Awesome. And the goal is to negotiate funding and support mechanisms for vulnerable countries affected by climate change. So all of you, although you all agree that we need to address climate change, I get we all agree. Okay, do we all agree we need to address climate change? Yes. Sounds like some of you just sound like we could live with climate change. Do we all agree we should address climate change? Awesome. So we all agree on that one. What we don't quite agree on is how. We agree we should have a loss and damage fund because there's a lot of loss, there's a lot of damage. And to make sure we're on the same page when it comes to what loss and damage is, this is also in your document. Loss and damage normally refers to the destructive impacts of climate change that cannot be or have not been avoided by what is known as mitigation, so reducing greenhouse gases, or adaptation, adjusting to and building resilient systems. So this is when you've put all the measures in place, but some things will still be lost, some things will still be damaged. So we're looking at lives, people dying, and animals, things like infrastructural damage, buildings being washed away, ecosystems where you've got lots of species dying off because of the heat or change, and even just businesses losing business or losing stock. So that's what we're talking about when we say loss and damage. The money that addresses these challenges, yeah? Awesome. And then in today's exercise, we'll be looking at the statement on the board. Would anyone like to read it out? Can someone please read the statement on the board for us? Can I? Is someone reading it there?
Instrument Loss and Damage Fund. Developed countries are legally obliged to contribute $10 million annually to the Loss and Damage Fund, but the contributions will be loans. Any country can access the funds.
Thank you. Thank you. So that statement, although it has some of what your interests are, some of them is not in your best interest. So in continuing to explain the exercise, that is loss and damage. At the end of the exercise, we want to have a statement that we all agree on that is representative of all of us. So to give you an idea of that, when we go through the countries and looking at your interests so that you also know what the people you are negotiating with are interested in. Just a second. Woke you up. Okay, how's that? All right, so we've got group 1, which is developing countries and developed countries. So this is this group again. And their interests are, no, I'm not going to say all of them. So they've got a lot of money, they're happy for the loss and damage, but they don't really want to be the only ones being held accountable. Because the colonial past, were poor because of them. So that gives you an idea of their position. And then we've got developing countries like Botswana. Is it fair countries like the UK and US industrialized cause climate change? A cyclone comes because of that climate change, washes out, Dineo comes, washes away the road. At the health budget, infrastructure, instead of them paying for it. And then you've got countries like small island states who are completely disappearing. You are sinking. In a few years, you might not be here. So you need money 2 weeks. At the end of the session, someone needs to sign a check because you've got time pressure and you've also got your lives at risk. We've got least developed countries who have been very exploited. They've got almost nothing. You don't have riches, but you are Malawi and you just got hit by a cyclone as well. So, and do you feel that you should have to take loans for this? And then we've also got the NGOs. The NGOs are a very important part within the process. They help build momentum, they help advocate for stuff, and they also get to make statements. So that gives you an idea of where everyone is. How we're going to do this is we're going to be quite time cautious. Firstly, please assign a speaker for your group. So each group needs a speaker. Please assign one speaker. And then the second thing is, do you all have this paper? This blank sheet of paper? Do you have a blank sheet of paper? Well, it should have previously been blank, now with your name on it. Okay, please write it in like big bold letters so that we can all see it. If you can use a marker, that would be great. All right, so this is your country badge. When you want to speak, you put your hand up with this, okay? It's just like at the core process. If you want to speak, you put Botswana up like this, and then they let you speak. And then the last thing, well, the first thing is that you're going to make opening statements. In your opening statements, you're supposed to present your interests, what you want to go in there, and your position as you start to negotiate. Yeah? No. So you're going to start with 1 minute statements showing us where your position is, and then after that you'll start to negotiate. Me, from this statement, can you please reduce the 5 million to 2 million, and each group will get to speak. So we'll give you 15 minutes to put together your 1 minute opening statement, and then after the opening statements we go into negotiations. And we'll all be walking around should you have any type of questions or need any type of support. Yeah? Does that chosen? Yeah?
Oh, I wanted to ask, does the chosen speaker of the group speak on behalf of every member who throughout the negotiations? Oh, that's a little complicated.
So that's the other complication with groups, because you are a group of countries. The same way we're saying that in developing countries, Botswana, South Africa, China, the UAE, all of them. So you have to take a consolidated position as that group that your one member is going to read. So first you consolidate your position, and then you present it. Do we have any other questions? All right. Are you all right? Okay. If you have any points of clarity, you can either call me, you can call Thabisang, who is also a youth negotiator negotiating Article 6, or Antonette. Are you all right? Good. All right, everybody. You have got 10 minutes. You've got 10 minutes, and then we're going to use the other 5 minutes to do your country statements. If you look at this, in the time allocation that you need. We are serious people because we stand here for our countries again. Yeah. So the guidelines to when you're about to speak. The speaker for LDCs, least developed countries, and NGOs, can we please have your attention? When you begin to speak, you don't just speak. You start by saying we as, and then you say which group you are with, again. Because you'll find that what's your country, small island developing states, you are a country by yourself, there are other groups that you belong to. So you need to start by saying we as, and then you continue. Yes? Each country, developing countries, 2, 1, you are not here. Developing countries, are you forfeiting your opportunity to represent your people? All right. So we are going to start with, guys, please listen, because this is what you'll be negotiating. Guys, okay? So each country has 2 minutes to make their statement. I am going to put on my timer, 2 minutes. We will be starting with developed countries. Where are the developed countries? All right.
All right. With cognizance to that, you start with the largest group, right? Like the largest group amongst them. So the moneyed ones, right? So yes.
Hello. We are the developed countries. So this is our speech now. We as the developed countries, our speech is, developed countries were willing to pledge to contribute $10 million annually to the loans and damaged funds, but contribution will be loans. Only less developed countries and small island states can access these loans with less interest, and developing countries will get higher interest rates. And then the second one is that developing countries work as collective to contribute $10 million any country can access, but a country which has to access this money will be given a time period of 1 year to pay back the money. Again, developed countries are also speaking that we are willing to give people this money only when they are damaged and losses, not annually, because some people may not have losses and damaged, but can take the money to only improve their countries instead of helping people with needs. And would like for the time frame to be please respected. If we don't pay money in the 1 year which will be provided with the interest, then more interest rate will be added. Okay. I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. A round of applause for developed countries. And with 2 minutes, but we have to now make it unison for everyone. But with that, a note for all the other groups. You need to write down what they're saying, because you have to negotiate against what they were saying. That we don't agree to 1, 2, 3 that was added here, or we agree to a certain extent to what the developed countries are saying, because we need to come to a common ground, right?
Okay.
Back to you, Chair.
All right. That was a thank you, Chair of the developed countries. I will now hand over to the developing countries to please submit your opening statement.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are good. I'm here representing the developing countries.
We as developing countries is how you start
we
your
as
statement.
the developing countries, we believe this statement that it says we should all be given 10 million USD and we should replace it so that we can have access to we can improve our facilities. We totally don't agree with that insanity as we developing countries, because we believe as developing countries we do have our key priorities areas, like we do have education. So these developed countries, they're setting a trap because they are the ones who are the major contributors of this climate change, because they've already destroyed what we have because of where they are at the moment. So we are saying we can be part of this insanity, and hence we have our chance. We're saying, okay guys, let's at least go back to the drawing table and say, let's have a party profiling. Let's look at how many countries, we as the developing countries, we look at our challenges that we are having. Are they immediate? Are they urgent? Are they long-term? Are they short-term? So that we can categorize, and we have to have a loan within that category of party profiling. So I believe with that being just said, we will continue engaging with this kind of conversation. As we hear the developing countries, what do they have to offer us in terms of the agreements that we do have for them. Thank you.
Thank you for that statement, developing countries. Insanity, I remember the word insanity. Shall we now go over to, I would like to invite to the floor, small island developing states. While you are here, before you drown and go away.
Good afternoon, everybody. We, as the small islands and developing nations, completely do not agree with this policy, which states that developing countries are legally obligated to contribute 10 million annually to the Loss and Damage Fund, but the contributions will be loans. The reason why we are disagreeing with this is because we have noted that us as SIDS are vastly and most drastically affected by issues surrounding climate change and climate crisis. And we also further noted that developing countries contribute 79% to the global rise in temperatures and greenhouse gases. Meanwhile, we as SIDS only contribute 1%. So we have put forth the notion that developed countries should actually be the ones to fund us in terms of loss and damages because they're the ones who have actually caused climate change crisis, right? And then another thing we noted and why we disagree is because when it comes to the cost of adaptation annually for the 1,000 islands within SIDS, the cost comes up to 22 billion. So if you think of that 22 billion and you're dividing it amongst 1,000 countries and you're saying you're going to give us 10 million, what are we going to do with this 10 million? And then in order to mitigate this, what we have come up with, what we want from you guys is to say that you should, for one, more specifically related to us as SIDS, we want you to completely get rid of the idea to say that we need to pay this loan back because we cannot afford to pay it back. Another reason why we're saying we cannot afford to pay it back is because of the economic inequality that is generated by climate crisis. And we as SIDS are mostly affected and already we're poor. How are we expected to pay this back? Another thing that we're saying we want to put forth is that it should come as a grant and not a loan. And then lastly, we also want you to develop a specific fund dedicated to us as the small islands. Because we are drowning, we are dying. Develop a fund for us.
Okay. Strong statement from the small island developing countries there. Get rid of loans, and is it fair? We shall now be turning to the least developed countries. Chair?
Good afternoon.
Chair, please note that
Good afternoon.
your time is ticking.
We as the least developed countries, we argue that we have to adjust the statement. Our first point is that this money should be given as a grant because as the least developed countries, we cannot afford to pay back the money. And then the part where any country can access the funds, we argue that the developed countries, they should not have access to the funds because they can afford to take care of their disasters. And also, another point is that the money should not be a fixed amount. A certain percentage of the gross national product per capita per country should be contributed. Because it shouldn't be a fixed, because not all the countries are equal in terms of finance. It should be a fixed percentage. And then they should say a country with this minimum GPA is not expected to pay, such that the least developed countries, they don't contribute. And then from a certain GPA upwards, they're the ones who contribute a certain percentage, right? And then from that money is a grant to the least developing countries and the developing countries. The developed countries don't have access to the money, right? Yeah. And then, how far?
28 seconds. Your names. Speak for your people.
Yes.
Speak for your people. But also, if you're done, that's also fine.
It's too much for the time. Yeah, I think that is that.
All right. Thank you, least developed countries. We shall now hand over to the non-governmental organizations. Oopsie. We shall now hand over to...
Hello, everyone. So we, as the NGOs and climate advocates, we call for the funding more available to address loss and damage to be given as a grant, not as a loan, and not as opposed to a loan, because the directing funding should be allowed to go directly to the NGOs and not to the government, not to be administered to the government, because the NGOs have a better understanding of what's going on than the government does. Agency to use the funds failed to leave by the government disaster reliefs as they have to go through the government protocols, which we don't want. We want the loans, not the loans, the grants to directly go to us, not to the government, but to us as the NGOs. The NGOs are better placed to identify vulnerable members of the areas, communities, and can direct the money to the right channels. Like as I stated, that we should not be given a loan, but a grant, because we have better ideas of where the money should be used, and we know where and which the right channels it should go to. How many seconds are left?
40.
40 seconds, okay.
Awesome.
Also, like I mentioned, it's better to address it to the NGOs than to the government. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so what we are now going to have, thank you so much, small island developing countries, non-governmental organizations, developed countries, least developed countries, and developing countries for representing your people. Thank you. You may return. So you have now all heard what the opening statements of your colleagues are. You know what their positions are. You know that developed countries are happy to give you a loan as long as you pay it back in 1 year. You know that they're willing to give you 10 million for all blocks, even though I think the small island developing country said they need 22 billion. So looking at that, what we're now going to do, we're now going to spend the next 10 minutes drafting a rebuttal. So drafting a rebuttal to whichever country block, response to whichever country block you would like to address their points. So we're starting our negotiations, and then after those rebuttals, we go into the negotiations. You guys start to talk directly to each other again. So right now, the time is 12:16. I'm going to hand over to Anto, and then you guys can get started on your statements. This time, you're going to have 1 minute for the responses to what they said.
Also to just remind you that even though you are rebutting, you also have the power to change your statement a bit.
Or some of you may be, you can't, guys, whatever you've sent there is what you're reading. You can't change it at this point. So, I need you to remember that when you are here, you are not only speaking for yourselves. I can come and so you guys want to represent the country. You want to lead the country. So when you are here, you don't speak as Pato, who's a little bit shy. Developed countries, please reel it in. You're not speaking as Pato, you're speaking as your people. What you say here, please turn around and face that way. Thank you. Because you see, at COP, guys might have been thrown out of the room. Now your countries are not represented. So you don't have the option of giving up. Otherwise, you are betraying your country. That's like if our president was to travel all the way to New York at the United Nations headquarters. Guys, giving up is not an option. You fight, you get the best deal that you can for your people because you don't have the option of giving up, especially as the leaders that you are today. If you're giving up today, that means you're giving up tomorrow. We don't have that option. Yeah? So when you speak knowing you are talking for millions of people behind you. This statement could inform whether people live or are washed away by floods. It could determine whether people have something to eat or they starve to death. With that being said, I would now like to open the floor. This time we will still go from the top, starting with developed countries. Please take the floor.
We, as developed countries, have taken your complaints, but then the thing is that we may assist we may assist in loans and damages only. Maybe you guys may take the money and do other things with it. And then the other thing is that assist damages and allocate over given money suitable for the damage. We'll only give you money which is enough for the damage which has occurred in you guys' places. The thing is that we can't give you guys as grants, because when we give you guys as grants, then we will not be able, the money which we are giving you guys, we want the money back into the account which you guys take it in with the interest, and the money will be used again when you guys need help for loans. We as much contribute to climate change. We also come up with interventions to help curb climate change. We, as developed countries, we also want to have access to the funds, because you never know which crisis, because as developed countries aren't on the same level with money.
Thank you. All right, so that is the statement from developed countries. You guys were already giving you money, so you must return it. And you guys are also contributing to the climate crisis, so we also want access to that fund. Lonala Ring, we will now have developing countries.
Afternoon again, guys. We as the developing countries, we still believe that the developed country can still do much more on what they're offering on the table. Because we are talking about the same people who are the major economic or the major key role players in this climate change issue that you are currently mitigating at the moment. So we believe we don't have to be provided with a loan, rather but a grant. Because we as the developing countries, we still have some our economic or other activities that we are still trying to regress we are trying to progress as a country. So considering this 10 million from our side, we can't possibly adhere to it. And we also say to the developed countries, you also need to look at your interest rates and also your time frames. We as developing countries, we are still developing. we haven't yet reached where you are at the moment. So you need to consider the time frame and the percentage that you say you guys we should pay back the money. So we still maintain our statement as the developing countries. Sorry, we want that. Okay, sorry.
Thank you. So from the developing countries, they want, what? Okay, looks like they're happy with a loan because they've got other things to do with their money, but they want lower interest rates and lengthier timelines. Okay, so what I'm hearing developing countries is, okay, you caused the problem, you can give us a loan and then continue to make money off of the interest that you've given us to solve the problem you caused, and we'll be good with that. Got it. Small island states.
We as small island states once again say that we are completely saying we do not want to pay back this loan. And you came up with 3 points, the first one being that you want to reduce the amount of time to pay back the loan. Even though we don't want your loan, we want a grant, we're saying that it's impossible even if you do give us a loan for us to pay it back because the climate crisis and that affect us such as monsoons take a year to repair. So during that year, we don't even have the time to rebuild our economy. How do you expect us to pay you back in a year? And then another issue that we identified is that us as small islands, we have a higher population density than other places around the world. And because of this, more people are affected by climate crises that happen. So because of this, we need more money from you guys as developed countries because there's more people being affected by these issues. And then another person I wanted to address was the NGOs. The NGOs said that they wanted all the money to themselves, but who holds you accountable? We need a third party between you and the money.
We've got it from the small island states. They said, we'll take your money. We're not paying it back, though. Pay it back with what? And to the NGOs, they said, but what if Lele Mahot? NGOs, well, least developed countries, please go ahead.
We as the least developing countries, we argue that the money should not be a grant but a loan. First off, the money should not be a loan but a grant. The money should not be a loan but a grant because we do not afford to pay back the money. So if it comes as a loan, it will increase our problems in the country. Just like an example is Zimbabwe, which is suffering economically because it already owns large world banks. So we agree that the money should be a grant. But if at all you want to give us the money as the loan should have zero interest. And then there should be an increased time frame because our development plans usually take about 5 years. About Vision 2026, it usually takes about 5 years, not 1 year. So we cannot repay your money in 1 year. And also the developed countries should be argued to reduce their emissions and their contribution to climate change.
All right. Thank you, least developed countries. I think that was pretty clear. We're not paying it back. You wish we would. And to close, we are going to close on the NGOs.
We as the NGOs are willing to pledge 10 million to the fund. Accessibility to developing the low interest amount has to be increased. Like basically you're going to be giving us a high amount of money, but for a lower interest. So only given out when there is proof of the loss damage. You said you can only give us a loan when there is proof of the loss damage. So you want us to show you that we have been through floods, we have been through natural disasters and stuff like that. And you also said that time frame has to be respected, else interest rate. So you want us to pay you a loan, to pay you back the money you loaned us instead of granting us. And this is going to be a cycle of debts. We already have debts that we have to pay, like fixing the roads that have been caused by floods, fixing a lot of things. So this is going to basically be a cycle of debts.
All right, thank you, NGOs. They're saying if you what do you mean you want proof? CNN, the BBC. And if you want us to pay back the loan, it is a cycle of debt. So what we're now going to do, oh, please give them a round of applause. All right, so what we are now going to do is, thanks, well done. Ooh, okay. We're now going to start to negotiate. And what we're negotiating, again, is this statement. Developed countries. Yeah. So now we're going to go into the negotiations. This is the statement. We now know where you stand. You know where the other countries stand. You know that they want to give you 10 million every year, but you know that SIDS are definitely not going to accept that because they need 200 billion annually. Developing countries, they're like, let's talk. NGOs also are saying, let's talk. So you know where the other groups are. But what you need, you've been here all day. Your countries put together money. They bought you flights. You've been staying in the hotels. 3 meals a day, 5 meals a day, because you've come to work for the people in your countries. You can't leave here without a decision because you will have failed. Not only yourself, but your countries. In your smaller countries, my dear island could have built roads, that could have bought medicine. You used it to get on a flight and come to our COP. So you need to take something better to your country than what they've spent on the trip here. You need to succeed. And what does success look like? A statement that you all agree on the board. You won't get everything you want. You won't get everything you wish for. If you look on your document, there's something called a red line. So a red line is basically your non-negotiable. This thing, no matter what, we are not, this is our position 10 toes down. So this statement, we're going to try and negotiate it so that we leave here with something. We've been working, we need to have something that works. So we are now going to open up our negotiation process, and what happens, it's going to be 30 minutes long. What happens during that time is you can talk to each other as country groups. You can strategize, you can see, okay, but if I give you this, will you give me that? You already know whose position is where. You can even build allegiances. So if all of you guys who think you need money then want to say, let's talk to developed country, let's group ourselves and cause pressure, all you guys as developed countries, if we can divide them. Small island countries, when their populations are low. And then how you do that, that's up to you. But we need a statement we all agree on. And after we agree on that statement, that's when we will have one, and I don't know what you'll get, but well, you'll get pride and country pride. I think I'll now hand over to Anto to have a word before we start the negotiations. And then after she goes, if you've got any questions, you'll put your hand up. Anto?
Okay, so if you remember when we were talking, we kept saying, when other groups say their statements, make sure you write that down. Pato just talked about the red line. Basically, you now know where each group stands. And when they were standing here, the most important thing was for each group to state what they want. So now that each group has you have to now start making sure that when the negotiation takes place, you know where they stand and how you could counter attack if it's an attack that. So now here's the funny catch. NGOs are never allowed in the negotiation rooms. There's, as the seats did say something about how NGOs, they need all the money and or that NGOs are what you can actually use to make sure you push your agenda, because NGOs stand for everyone, literally. So NGOs, much as they've been writing their points, your guys' points, you can either go to them, because most times money comes through NGOs. You can either go to them to negotiate with them and then strengthen your points for negotiation. And remember, negotiation it's one like about something like that.
So with that, I think we can start. Look at how you can align with NGOs for them to be your pressure group, whether you do that as developed countries, whether you do that, but NGOs, you will not be coming back to the floor. You might make a closing statement, but definitely not negotiations. And with that, please go and make your country proud. Negotiate. This is the text that we started with. I wanted to check if we have a text that we agree on. Have we gotten a text yet? Have we gotten a consensus text yet? Developing countries, do we have a text yet that we agree on? That we all agree on, okay. SIDS, have you been able to negotiate a text that people agree on? All right. LDCs, these developed countries, have you been able to negotiate something that people agree on? Developed countries? Also nothing. All right. So with that being said, let's go back to the text on the screen, because it's the only text that we have. That means we're now going to either agree or disagree to this text. I will take votes by yes or no. I get aye and nay.
Yes.
So we'll take aye and nay depending on the volume. That will tell us where we're going to, if we're adopting this or not, yeah? All right. Checking if all the voting blocks are ready. Yes? Are you ready to vote? Yes, at the back? Yes? Oh, also, guys, this is not, the way we're doing it now, where we're going to be voting, this is not part of the process. It's just so we have a conclusion. At COP, all of you have to agree on a text for it to be adopted, or you leave it open for the next cycle of negotiations, yeah? All right. So, reading the text that goes for the loss and damage fund, developed countries are legally obliged to contribute $10 million annually to the loss and damage fund, but the contributions will be in loans. Any country can access the funds. If you agree with this statement, you say aye. If you disagree, you say nay. Are you ready to vote? All right. If you agree with the statement, please say aye. No one agrees with the statement? Okay. If you disagree with the statement, say nay. Nay. This must be a terrible statement. Okay. The nays have it. At least you agree on something. Please give yourself a round of applause. So what we're now going to move on to is closing statements. No one will leave this conference with funds. No one is getting funds. That we've all agreed. You are not getting money. You are not getting money. Uhu. You are not getting money. The developed countries get to keep their money. Uhu.
NGOs and CSOs. Climate justice. No. Climate justice. No. Climate
climate justice. No more delays to financial transparency. Climate justice. No more delays to financial justice.
Climate justice. No loans. Climate justice. No loans. Climate justice. No loans. Cycle off. Death. Cycle off. Death. Cycle off. Death. Climate justice. No loans.
Security. We think we've got some intruders. We understand that this is a passionate issue. However, we have processes. Things are done in a processed manner. Security, developed countries, please release some money so that security can come and release these people. Did you just say the cyclone will deal with them? All right, guys, let's start to wrap this up. All right. And that is actually what happens at COP. So you will have demonstrations like this. If you're on the delegates group, I'll look for if I can find one of the videos of demonstrations to share. We shall now be going to closing statements. So with these statements, they still need to be strong because remember we said we couldn't agree on something now, but we're back here next year and we're negotiating. So whatever is noted from you, people still know what's important to you, and by they know how they can please you. So I trust you all have do you have closing statements? All right. I will give you 10 seconds to please come and make your closing statements. Please send your representatives to come and apologize to their people and explain why countries that do not have money have spent millions for you to come and negotiate for them and come back with nothing.
Wait.
But why are you taking my microwave?
Microwave.
All right. Can I please get your speakers? 5, 4, 3, 2. Whoever's not here when I get to 1, I'm going to dock 5 seconds from your closing statements, and you only have 1 minute. We need another microphone. Are we not missing someone? NGOs, we need someone to come and make a statement. We will start with developing countries this time. All right, developing countries. Ooh.
Good afternoon, everyone. In our conclusion as developing countries, we believe that the money that the developed countries promised us, they should 100% give it to the NGOs and the small islands because those are the major key players when it comes to climate mitigation in around all the world. So in that closing brief, the developed countries, we do. Because unfortunately we didn't come to an agreement, so we are proposing that the 100 million should be given it's 10 million.
Order. This is not the world stage where you can do as you want because you've got money. Please.
We came to an agreement that that the 10 million should be awarded to the NGOs and the small islands. So with that being said, from the developing countries, we thank you.
All right.
Unfortunately, the least developed countries, we are all measure contributors to the...
Time. Okay, thank you, developing countries. So if you are constituent of a developing country like we are in Botswana, we just sent people all the way to COP, and when they got there, they fought for other people's rights, and they brought nothing for us. But well done, Khair. Small island developing states. Please go ahead. 1 minute.
Okay, in closing, what we would actually like from the developed countries and is to develop a grant, a funding grant specifically for us as SIDS because of our special case, which we were recognized as a special case country in 1922. So because of this, we want our own separate fund for us. And that fund should encase 100 million at least. And this fund needs to be open, not annually, but rather it should be open for when climate crises happen because they happen frequently in small islands, right? And then another thing, we agree with the developing countries to say that the money should be given to NGOs. Give the money to the NGOs and work through them so that they can help us relief, right? Yeah. Is there still time? Okay, and then another thing I wanted to say is that you cannot say you're measuring the magnitude of something that happened right now because there's long-term effects that happen later. So don't say you're going to look at the magnitude. No, rather look at how adversely it has affected us when giving us this money.
Thank you, SIDS. And they have been consistent to their message, run us our money, but we're not paying it back. You can give us grants, but you can give it to NGOs, which in theory is great until you remember that most NGOs that get most of the grants are in the global north and are in developing countries. So basically, my dear, I'll go New York, I'll go Washington, and then Dichenchi maybe will reach you and you might be able to buy peppermints for conference in Xinjiang. LDCs, your closing statement.
We as the least developing countries, we still want the money as a grant, and in return we will give you 100% transparency. We will report back what have you used all the money for. We will account for the whole of the money. Yeah, so you should keep your promise as per the Paris Agreement. And then if the money is not enough, you can also give us give us the grant, then we can take a loan on top of the grant. And then also we also argue that you should give us skilled labor. Yeah, you should also give us some skilled labor for construct that. So we can prevent we can tackle those things again. Yeah.
Thank you, LDC's great closing statement, taking some, giving some, putting something on the table. Give us grants and we'll have transparency. Good one. And then in closing, can we please have the... Can we please have developed countries?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We, as the developed countries, we stand to oppose the proposal that we are legally bound to contribute $10 million annually to the Loss and Damage Fund. But we stand to say that we will pledge $10 million USD after every year has passed, and which will be given as loans to the loss and damage at specific interest after the evaluation and assessment of the extent of the damage and loss that the countries are facing. And we are saying that any country, including us as the developed countries, we should benefit from the funds. And when we come to the issue of loans, we are saying that we will give them 40% grant and 60% as loans, and we are agreeing to bring up our developments to their countries, as in would have to take a portion of their land, but give us a portion of their land, and we do our projects on their countries, which will also benefit them. Instead of just giving them money, we can come by ourselves, and they can maybe even reduce the rate at which they are selling their resources to our countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. You may take your seats. Developed countries saying, we'll give you loans and grants, but we also want access to it, which means we're learning 10 million. But also, if they have all the control over the interest, they can say, in the first year, we'll give you 2%, you pay it back. If you don't pay it back, interest is now 40%. Take it or leave it. Highly allendion. But guys, thank you so much for engaging with that exercise. Okay, I'm closing, then I'll give it. So we're going, unfortunately, we're out of time. I had miscalculated our time a bit, so we need to go straight to lunch. So we won't get to do a collective reflection. You'll reflect in your groups. And what I wanted to highlight with some of this is that we wanted you to appreciate the level of complexity that goes into negotiating some of these spaces. So governments are huge entities. You need to work together, and they move slow. There's a role within the climate crisis, within addressing climate action for all of us. Government will do policies, they can do negotiations and all of those things. When they get it right at a huge pace for everyone, which is why it's a bit slower. But what we can do as young people, what you can do as students, is taking your small steps, which are much quicker, which are very nimble, which are also very necessary, yeah? And then the other thing we wanted to highlight with that was the complexity of negotiating. When I was making the comments with some of the things that you were putting forward, it wasn't to strip your argument, but it was to show you the loopholes that you might not even see. At COP, you're negotiating. I remember the one time I was in a negotiation, text the agenda. And it fell, the complete text, we've got a text, we're going to agree, we've come, sharp, we've negotiated all the other words, but there's a comma. And we ended up closing that COP without agreeing because of one single comma. The placement of one single comma. That comma would have meant either other countries are included or not. So it's a lot of attention to detail. It's also why we need you to go into those negotiation rooms. It's why we need you as people who understand finance and understand how much money we need as Botswana. It's why we need you as legal people. By like statement, there's not just what's written. It's why we need you as young people who are passionate to show up as NGOs. They will at the very least shame countries who are not ashamed to say, I'll give you 10 million if you give me your land. Some countries are audacious. And in closing this is to say there's a role for all of you. We need to use it, whether it's at negotiations, whether it's negotiating your projects within all of that and locating what climate action you're going to take. I am now going to hand over to Anto, who has been absolutely brilliant at co-facilitating the session. Please give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Just to add on, well, when I was going around, there were a few mistakes that some groups were making. And I think the most important thing you should always do is to study and read. I know I've mentioned to a few groups that everyone here is your enemy. But knowing, first of all, what you want and what is at stake is what will actually help you know what kind of statement to make. You remember the developed country statement was so specific. Like, who knew? And what's even funny, they said it at the last part. No one can say anything about it. They even want the land, which is like, a lot. And Pato did say that NGOs are also mostly in the global north. Like, NGOs could be having headquarters in Switzerland, so which means even if the money is with them, they can use it even in their countries and not to you, which means as much as that is an opportunity, make sure it's the kind of opportunity that is not a challenge to you. You need to be smart, and the word play is the most important thing. Like Pato has said, the word play is what can keep the negotiations going for days and days. Negotiations, the first part takes 1 week. And sometimes it means negotiating from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. in the morning, the whole time. You only have 5-minute breaks for toilet, water, and the more you go out for toilet, the more they've already taken advantage. And there are only 4 people or at least 2 people representing each country. Do you see how extra it is? Which means each and everyone has to know where the country stands and how they can be able to make sure they win. Now maybe commenting to the developing countries, they were very selfless. That's kind, but not necessary, because as much as you are selfless, it shows, as much as say what Pato was saying, there's a cyclone coming, and you know who is being affected by cyclones? The seeds. But the seeds, as much as they're being affected, developing countries like, for example, Botswana, we can say, oh, hey, but yes, you have problems, but I also have problems. So I'm here for my people. And sometimes just me saying, that's exactly one of the reasons why sometimes we take up to more than 13 hours in the same room. And let me tell you the funny thing. Sometimes, temperature about to 10 degrees. Decision. That's how it's so you need to be very, very strategic to know what you want. Yes, or sometimes even actually most decisions are made the last day. Like COP is from the 11th to the 22nd, right? Usually the 22 weeks or Bone come midnight, what 22, 23, decisions, and most countries have left. You see how, when I say most of them, I mean developed countries. So you see how you need to be very smart in this kind of thing. You need to learn, even if the other group is saying something that is being unfair, you need to learn how to be so unfair, but being very considerate so that at the end of the day, you don't speak and they don't hear you. Do you understand? You need to be heard. That's why toing helps, but you need to be heard in the negotiation rooms. So this is basically what we go through. Sometimes we can go years without a decision. Sometimes we can go for years without anything, having failed as a country. But I really am glad for you guys. You really did the best, and you did your... I was seeing people negotiating and going over and over, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly how it is. You already prepare yourself for 2 weeks of no sleep, because you depend on it as a country, as the youth, and all that. So every time you hear there's a fund or there's a negotiation, try and see how you could also participate, whether to read, go into the UNFCCC website, the documents are always there, of the decisions that are being made. Thank you.
Right. A round of applause for the facilitators for that section.